Thank you to everybody for joining us this afternoon, or maybe earlier if you're on the West Coast. My name is Mariame Kaba, and I am welcoming everybody and grateful to you for joining the conversation. Thanks also to all of the interpreters and everybody behind the scenes that's working to make this conversation happen smoothly, and to make it as accessible as possible. I was asked to participate in this conference, and one of the things that I've learned over the years is that the best way to um, do anything is to do it with other people, to do it with other people who you are in community with, other people who you respect, love, and admire. I do believe, and I say this all the time, having learned from my dad, that everything worthwhile is done with others, and it's true. And so that's the spirit that we're coming to you today, for this plenary. Abolition is about making things. I invited some friends, collaborators, and comrades to join me, and they are Neta Bomani, Bianca Diaz, Naima Thomas, Monica Trinidad, Rachel Wallis. Each of these wonderful people are folks that I've been lucky to collaborate with, both as an organizer and also, and in terms of their work as organizers, but also their work as artists and cultural workers. And I admire them greatly. I love the work they do, and I wanted to take an opportunity to have be in conversation with them. So if you're going to ask me to do something, I'm going to try to figure out a way to do the thing I want to do, that I never get time to do. So I'm very excited to listen to what they're going to share, and then we're going to come together and be in a conversation for a few minutes. And then the hope is then to invite you all to join us in sharing your questions or feedback or comments. And that's how it's going to go. Um, so to kick us off, next slide. I want to just ground us. This is a conversation about prison industrial complex abolition. One of my recent collaborations was with my friend, who's a great artist, Micah Bazant. Micah coordinated this abolition imagination cards project that I've been wanting to do for a while. And I'll talk a little bit about why imagination matters so much in our work as organizers, particularly abolitionist organizers. But these are some of the cards that were made and created through that process. I shared a series of quotes that I think are very integral to the practice of abolition. And these amazing artists, including Monica, created some art, visual art that accompanies some of these words. Next slide, Monica. You can kind of roll through the various slides that show some of the images. This is a compendium of various images that we shared, that works created and put back out into the world. I'll put a link to where people can download them. You can download and print them in your communities. We invite people to do that, as long as you're not using any of these for sale or for profit. Next slide, Monica. You can kind of roll through the rest of them. This is uh, an image of a quote, that I say, which is always like, when something can't be fixed and the question is, what can we build instead? This is from Micah. Next slide is Monica, um, making a beautiful piece of art with a quote by Martina Spada. No change for the good ever happens without it being imagined first, even if that change seems hopeless or impossible in the present. Next slide. This is a quote from Ruha Benjamin, who I really appreciate, and art by Ashley Lukashevsky. And the quote is, remember to imagine and craft the worlds you cannot live without, just as you dismantle the ones you cannot live within. Next slide. These are two pieces of art that Shireen made. Um, and One is from a quote by Angela Davis that I always appreciate. You have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world. You have to do it all the time. And Audre Lorde, it is our dreams that point the way to freedom. So both are beautiful. And I think that's the last slide in the deck. We'll stay on this slide until I'm done. And I, wanted to open with these imagination cards because really, if you think about what abolition means, it means a lot of things to a lot of different kinds of people. I like Thomas Mathieson, who's a Norwegian sociologist, conceptualized abolition. He called it an alternative in the making. And the way that that kind of speaks is that abolition, particularly prison industrial complex abolition, which is what we're rooted in for this conversation, it's pushing us to break with the current order, to say kind of not this, like we're not down with this, while simultaneously trying to forge new ground, to build a different world. For me, PAC abolition is a vision of a restructured society and world, a world where we have everything we need, including food and shelter and education and art and health and beauty and clean water and more. And since, as an abolitionist organizer, a big part of the work is to push people to imagine a world without prisons, policing, and surveillance and sentencing, um, it's to do that and then to organize to make that a reality. So, as part of that, I spend a lot of time thinking about the future and about the fact that it really exists in our imaginations. And the future and imagination are important to me because the horizon that I'm working towards is one I've never seen. And that horizon is a world without these things, without these death making institutions. And as my friend Eve Ewing says, it's in order to create pathways towards that which we have never seen, we have to lead with imagination. All of the most important, impactful social transformations happened because people fought and struggled for things they had never seen. So, as PAC abolitionists, we're really trying to prefigure the world in which we want to live. And to do that, we're practicing abolition every day. So, this involves both organizing for the destruction of death making institutions and for the creation of life giving and affirming ones. My friend and fellow abolitionist Erica Miners has written that liberation under oppression is unthinkable by design. And so, this is why it's so important to cultivate imagination, because oppression and violences of all kinds have an awful way of putting a ceiling on our imaginations. And artist and filmmaker Chris Vargas often talks about the fact that one of the most destructive aspects of the prison industrial complex is that it creates something he calls occupied imaginations. Occupied imaginations. So we need to consistently grasp for ways to unleash our imaginations in the face of oppression. And art can be a way for us to do just this. Because if the PIC could be invented, so too can we imagine a world that would operate without it. Surely we can do that. And more than that, we can prefigure that world in which we want to live in the present. We can ask ourselves questions like, what could we grow instead of punishment and suffering? We need our imagination to create our responses. We can ask questions like, what are the ruptures and breaks that allow us to prefigure another way of living? Again, we need our imaginations for that. Art can be helpful to us in that. Um, Sometimes it's been my experience um, that when we're organizing, we can focus exclusively on what people are supposedly, quote, ready for. What are people ready for? Like, people aren't ready for this world. Well, you know what? PIC abolition is rooted in collective art making because it allows us to accompany people as they explore what they truly long for using their imagination. Um, in the words of Amisha Patel, is one of the best organizers I know, who is based in Chicago, she says that many of us feel like we have to negotiate an unworkable system. Art, making things, is about unlocking what we can create, not just managing an unworkable system. Our creative power is at the center of our organizing for justice and liberation. Hope is creative, creative is hope. And I think Anisha gets to the heart of the matter. You know, plagiarizing Claudia Jones, who famously said, a people's art is the genesis of their freedom. I'm going to say that creativity and abolition are the genesis of our freedom. So, with that, I just want to encourage all of us to stay creative, to abolish the prison industrial complex, and to get free. So incredibly grateful to be joined today in conversation with these amazing people. And so I'm going to throw over next to our next person who's going to kick us off, and that's my friend Neta Bomani.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Okay. Hi, I'm Neta. I'm a worker, an abolitionist, a learner, and an educator. And I'm so grateful to be here today with you all. I'm always honored to be in conversation with Mariame and all of the people who sort of collaborate with Mariame. I've heard of you and like been in conversation with you tangentially. And so I'm really honored today to be directly in communication with you. All of this is just to say that I've studied under many thinkers, including Mariame, including Sloan Brown, Ruha Benjamin, and Fred Moten. And so it's within this long lineage of thinkers and creators that I'm talking to you and speaking from today. I've also taught at the School for Poetic Composition, Yale University, the New School, and New York University. And my practice involves parsing information and histories while making things by hand with other people, and also computational media like computers and paper circuits and paper itself as technology. And I use a research-based practice to sort of help me through this creative process. And specifically for the zine making process, which is my preferred medium and form of communicating and making art objects. I'm constantly engaging in and mediating and studying and honoring history so that I can sort of exercise this process of letting go. I see zine making as a release rather than what a lot of us might be familiar with within academia as this like exclusionary, citational, and knowledge hoarding practice of the academy and colonialism at large. And so for me, I often work through archival processes, either by way of conducting oral histories and digitizing physical archives and documents. And then I sort of like transfer over to collaging and working with the archive in the form of a zine. And so there's a lot more to my creative process, but this is essentially the essence, and it can, you know, vary depending on who I'm collaborating with. And so abolition is an energetic force that grounds my life practices and also my craft that extends from my daily living. I believe that craft and struggle are entangled, especially when it comes to struggles rooted in abolitionist politics. And more specifically, Black people, especially those who are queer like me, gender nonconforming like me, socialized as women, have been crafting and making zines throughout history to put our struggles into the historical record. And this is sort of always against and in tension with institutional violence and the sort of erasure that often follows within this context. And so here I'm thinking about people like Ida B. Wells, I'm thinking about Langston Hughes, Claude McKay, Gwendolyn Bennett, Zora Neale Hurston, and Dorothy Carter Higginson, among many others who I couldn't possibly name within the time limit of this session. So the work that I do and they do is very much so entangled in the movement for Black lives, and more specifically, the parts of the movement that work to highlight the essential role that Black people of oppressed gendered experiences play. So one example of how abolitionist politics informs my work is dark matter objects. Dark Matter Objects is a project I made recently for my graduate thesis, and it's essentially a book that I made by hand for children and adults that tells the story of the influence of computational history and how computational history organizes structures and the politics of our daily life when it comes to rituals or just the basic ways we communicate with each other. And it's a project that speaks for itself, so I'm just going to play a short trailer for you right now.
I have come to believe over and over that what is most important to me must be spoken, made verbal and shared, even at the risk of having it bruised or misunderstood.
To bring this history to you, I had to go through muck and mud.
Dark matter objects, technologies of capture and things that can't be held.
Chapter 1. This is a story about words. This is a story about language. This is a story about the language of things. This is a story about the fabric of our lives. This is a story about masters and slaves.
Yeah, so I'm happy to talk more about that later in the context of the rest of the panelists, but thank you, and I'll pass it on to the next person.
Thank you so much, Neta. Beautiful work as always. I'm going to throw over to Bianca, who's going to take us over next.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, and I am so grateful to be in conversation with all of you. And Neta, that was very beautiful. So I'm just sharing. So my name is Bianca Diaz, and I am an artist from Chicago's Pilsen neighborhood. My history there is just my family immigrated to Pilsen in the 50s from Mexico. So I've kind of grown up in that community over a couple generations. So the way that I came to be, I guess, aware of the prison industrial complex and of this work is I was an intern for Project Nia, and I attended an 8-week workshop thanks to Mariame Kaba and everyone who organized it was about abolishing the prison industrial complex and about what it is at the Jane Addams Hull House. And so while I was still an intern, Mariame commissioned me to do a poster about picturing a world without prisons and just what that looks like. So that's what you see here on this first slide is just that idea of like, what is it when we're not kind of isolated from each other, when we're not using prisons, how much life can happen and how much connection between families and communities. So I've been kind of studying Mariame's new book, We Do This Till We Free Us. And I think some of the ways that I understand abolition right now is it's about refusing organized abandonment and collective community care and imagination. And so that's some of the things that I'm going to talk about with my work and how I feel that it kind of intersects with an abolitionist politic. So while I was an intern with Mariame, I also created a comic called The Princess Who Went Quiet, and it's about, I forgot to mention that I'm a children's book illustrator, sorry. So that's kind of where all my work centers around children's illustration and work for children. So yes, I created this comic and it's about a young girl who literally and metaphorically gets trapped in the belly of a dragon. So it's kind of about, well, I created this work through workshops that Mariame helped me organize. So I spoke with previously incarcerated mothers and asked them what they would need in a story for their children and how could a book help. And I think what I learned from those conversations was that first and foremost, children need to know the truth and they don't need to be kind of lied to, sounds harsh, but just like, you know, the truth just needs to be stated clearly. And also that it's very important for children who are affected by the incarceration of a loved one to be able to get their internal out. So in this story, she's trapped in the belly of a dragon, which is kind of a metaphor for herself. And you see like there's this turmoil in her stomach and this imagining happening in her mind. And so throughout the story, she goes on this journey. And so kind of the height of the story is this moment when she's finally able to speak. And she says, "I see you, do you see me?" So she's trying to help the capybaras of her kingdom who are disappearing behind an invisible wall that's kind of separating them from the rest of society. So she sees them and speaks her insides out. And that's kind of something that I really try to focus on with my work for children, is just getting that inside part out. And I think that's part of imagination, is like being able to externalize is so much a part of creativity. And if you can't do that, then how can you kind of create? Like you can, you know, create internally, but to kind of affect change and bring about this new world, you have to be able to share it with others. So my first like not self-published children's book is called The One Day House, and it was written by Julia Durango, and it's about a young boy named Wilson who wants to help fix up his elderly neighbor's home. So throughout the story, he's talking to everyone in his community about his ideas. Like he wants to get new windows and paint the house and fix the stairs so that she can enjoy her life. And so he also, while he's talking about this with his community, he's also creating artwork. So he's kind of externalizing all of these ideas and making plans. And then in this image, you see him sharing all of this knowledge with his class and kind of acting as someone who has an innate knowledge. And I think that's something I also try to bring to my work, is just like honoring that children know so much already and have this innate knowledge and vision for the future that they want. And just, I guess in my work, I try to show kids who are doing that and encouraged to do that. And so just one last slide. Right now I'm working on a children's book with Mariame about a young girl whose mother is incarcerated, who is going to be incarcerated, and sort of their last moments together, and like before they're separated for 2 years. And so I think with this book, I'm trying to focus on the emotion of that, and just trying to honestly express what it is like for this child. And you see like how it could be if her mother wasn't incarcerated, and kind of like part of this organized abandonment that is the PIC. So you see like they do homework together, they go to the library, her mother does her hair, like she's connected. This is like, these realities already exist. We don't need that much imagination to see like how beautiful things could be without the PIC. And then just also focusing on her like hurt and anger and sadness. So to kind of, I guess, sum it up, I guess I try to think about the future, and then also reflect what it is like now for children, so that they can have like something that affirms that it's okay to feel how they feel. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there. Thank you. And I'll pass it to the next person.
Thank you so much, Bianca. I just want to say, one of the problems that I have is that anybody who comes to work with me at any point in their life ends up in a lifelong relationship with me. And I don't think that when Bianca came and interned with me years ago, that she thought she'd still be being pulled into projects. But that's how it works. So you start working with me, you're never going away.
That is my hope, and that is makes me really happy. So I'm so happy to be involved and continue to be pulled in, and I'm grateful. Thank you.
The next person who's going to speak and share is the wonderful Naima Thomas. So Naima, you're on.
Hello, thank you. I'm so happy and excited and nervous to be here. And I just realized, Bianca, I have your book. So that definitely got me teared up. I never know how to introduce myself with things. I'm a Chicago-based artist and art therapist here. And I've worked with Mariame on a couple of different projects, and it's just been a really like humbling process. I came to Abolition in this work kind of late in life. I grew up not having a lot of access to things, and then finally coming to graduate school, I was able to like name experiences and start doing some of that emotional and academic labor. So sometimes I feel like I'm playing a bit of like catch up, but also wanting to acknowledge all my lived experiences. So I'll go ahead and pull up my slides. I only put a couple up. 1 second. Share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see that okay? Okay. Yeah, so as I stated, I'm an artist and I'm an art therapist. I'm currently working in private practice right now in Chicago, working virtually. And I just included just 2 pieces of art and a quote that I created for my bio. And it basically just says, the journey toward healing begins with our own willingness to be vulnerable with ourselves, embrace our mistakes, and remind ourselves that life is a process. And that is something I'm actively learning through being a clinician, through being an artist, being in the community with so many people, being inspired by Monica as a part of FTP. So just all of this like learning and relearning, and also like accepting that I do know things, even if it's not on paper. And so me and abolition, I think I always heard of the word when I was younger, but never quite understood what it meant. And finally, once I was in my last year of graduate school, I was interning at Cook County Jail. And I was also interning at a youth-based organization. And I think it gave me this clear picture of the impact of the prison industrial complex, being able to work with young people and seeing them impacted by not having families around, lack of resources. And I was able to finally like put a name to it. And so I was creating art, and I wanted to do it in a way that didn't exploit the young people, because we see pictures of at-risk youth, right? Especially as a clinician, I didn't want to do that. And so I wanted to be really mindful and honor them and their like differences, but also really think deeply about my experience, because while I was interning at Cook County, my brother is also incarcerated there. And so it kind of gave me this insight of, okay, this is the experience. And people would ask me like, well, how are you doing that? How are you making it happen? At the end of the day, people are people. There were mothers in groups, there were sons, daughters. And when you go in thinking like, okay, this system really is not helping, it's hurting them. And so I think that pushed me more to an abolitionist like framework. And then also being a clinician, I'm working within these systems. So I worked at Chicago Children's Advocacy Center, and you work closely with like police officers and social workers. And I found myself always being conflicted. Like, this is not working. You're telling people to reach out for support. Part of the reason why I stepped away from doing nonprofit for a little while, especially during the pandemic, is that people need housing. They need resources, they need food. And so you can't help them do a CBT worksheet if they don't have their basic needs met. And so I just found that I needed to take a step away for a little bit, just because it feels so heartbreaking, because you can't, I can't work with someone who's in a car with their 3-year-old in a way that feels ethically like sound when I know that they don't have the resources they need. So I found myself being just really conflicted. And also knowing on the other end of like, what does it look like not to have those basic resources? So as a clinician, I find myself in just always like this limbo of trying to really find resources for individuals, support their process, but also point out the systems that harm, especially as a clinician. So one of the things I'm committed to is doing like a person-centered approach. So yes, I do have hierarchy when it comes to the therapeutic relationship, but when someone's coming in wanting to like talk about anxiety, well, it's like, where is that anxiety coming from? Is it performance? Is it the system? If you're struggling with self-esteem, is it because, you're comparing yourself to what white supremacy says is beautiful? And I feel like I can't do this work if I'm not paying attention to the system. So I really try to make sure that in my practice, I think about all the systems that are at play. And just letting people know that you're doing the best that you can. And if we had our basic needs met, like Mariame said, housing, food, medical services, people will be doing what they truly wanted to do, and that's building community with other people. So I always try to bring that into my art practice. And I think the more that I'm growing and learning, I'm also unlearning and doing my best to advocate, but also it feels sometimes hard because the systems just are not set up to create this new world, right? And so I try to share that with people, but it can be challenging. So that's kind of where I'm at with my art practice. I'm still learning and growing. I'm currently envisioning justice grantee. And so I'm working with women in the Roseland, Rosemore area to create art, and they've all been impacted by the prison industrial complex at some point. And so really just giving time to uplift their voices, their artwork. They're doing a podcast. So it's just like great to see that people have stories and they want to share. And how can I do like my due diligence to like uplift that? So thank you. I will pass it on to the next artist after I stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Naima.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you. I'm also putting in the chat various of the resources that people are mentioning or posting, so you have access to them. Next, we have the amazing Monica Trinidad. You're on, Monica. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I am quickly sharing my screen and also timing myself because I could talk forever. So my name is Monica Trinidad. I am a community taught artist. I am based in Chicago, which is Potawatomi and Kickapoo land. And I've been making art in service to movements for several years now. I started out creating zines with Brown and Proud Press, which is a zine making collective in Chicago. I also co-created For the People Artist Collective, and also co-host the Lit Review podcast with my friend Paige May. So I'm really thankful Mariame invited me to be part of this conversation with so many incredible artists. And because I like to make things and I experiment with things all of the time. And so, yeah, I'm really thankful to be here. So thank you. So when I think about an abolitionist politic, some words that come to mind are process, experimentation, transformation, and the possibility of another world. And when I think about my art practice over the last several years, those same words come up for me. I began creating artwork in collaboration with organizations that I was either part of or in community with. And really I'm lucky because I've had the opportunity to experiment with these organizations and create and fail, and then experiment again, and then succeed, and then experiment again. And that's sort of how I see abolition. There isn't this one size fits all formula for what a world without prisons and police looks like. People are not a monolith. And so you really have to talk to people and figure it out together. And so that's why for me, the process is really just as important as the product or the finished artwork. Because working in collaboration with directly impacted people has been really important for impactful work for me. And I created this poster in collaboration with formerly incarcerated women at the People's Paper Co-op in Philadelphia, who are leading efforts to free Black mothers and caregivers from prison, particularly every Mother's Day. The paper that these prints were printed on were created by the women, and they were created from shredded criminal records. So there was that piece as part of it as well that felt really powerful. And I got to talk virtually with these women and about their ideas of what a world where no women are locked up would look like. And I got to hear them talk about, you know, this very celebratory atmosphere. They said there was sounds of music and laughter and parades and the popping sound of popcorn, which really stuck out for me. And I wanted to emphasize in this because that's something I would not have thought of had I done this work in a silo, in isolation, right? And so for me, I feel like art has the power to really construct this visual narrative of power for those who feel powerless and in this situation that they're in or in this society. And it can provide really like a jumping off point for folks who want to start building a vocabulary or want to start discussing things like the prison industrial complex or abolition, but just kind of don't know how to talk about it. And so someone might see this poster and resonate with it and then want to figure out how to tap into this work. So it's kind of, I see it as this tool for engagement, really. The next poster I want to talk about is, it's a poster I created with artist Fernando Marti. We did it as part of Just Artist Collective, which we are a part of. And it was created for this community supported art practice or process that we have a subscription for through Just Seats. And so something I'm learning about is that art, like abolition, doesn't always have these precise measurable outcomes. And if I felt like it had to, I would be disappointed every time I created art. And so I feel like art opens up this like crucial space for us to think sort of beyond what's right in front of us and to expand our imaginations. And this quote here is by Naomi Murakawa, which is in the foreword of Mariame's new book, We Do This Till We Free Us. And the quote says, "Why be a star when you can make a constellation?" And it references Mariame's consistent commitment to collaborative work, as we see here in this talk, versus like individual stardom. And we were really inspired by those words, and we wanted to share this as an offering to all of us who are like trying to figure out what our role is in the movement or in community, or how we can best be in this spotlight of this work. And because to many that might mean success, right? And so this quote says, why don't we stop worrying about those things for just a second and look around and see what work is being done already, and how you can tap into that work. Or if you don't see that work happening, how you can start up that work in collaboration with other people. That's how we started. Naima and I and many others started For the People Artist Collective. We saw a much needed space for artists and organizers in Chicago to value art and to see art not just as like an accessory to organizing, but as integral, as vital, as essential to organizing and to campaign work. And it's a necessary way to engage people. Oh, that's my timer. But I have one more slide to share, and that is that this poster I made for Just Seeds, which is the cooperative I'm part of, and then the Centers, which is a national youth-led anti-militarism organization. I was tasked with creating artwork using one of their key principles, which is solidarity with people and movements. And I thought about how simple that could feel to so many people, but actually how deeply abolitionist this principle is, right? It makes me think about how important art is as a container to ground us in the daily work that we do as abolitionist artists, as organizers, as community members. And it's sometimes we can get so caught up in doing things right and doing things that work in a way that makes everybody happy, but that's never gonna happen, right? So art really offers a space to reground in why we do the things we do and who we do those things for. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you.
Thanks, Monica. Last but certainly not least is Rachel Wallis. Take it away, Rachel.
Like Monica, I am also setting a timer because, yeah, once you get started, there's no stopping. My name is Rachel Wallis. I'm a community taught artist and quilter, and I'm currently the artist in residence at Project Nia. You can see some of the work I'm doing on my studio wall for that residency. I'm collaborating with Mariame on a piece about a massacre of prison laborers in Georgia in the 1940s. But I really wanted to share with you a different project today, and a project that for many reasons is not my favorite project, but I think sometimes those are the best projects to learn from. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and start at the beginning. I wanna talk about a project I did a couple of years ago called Inheritance, Quilting Across Prison Walls. And this sort of grew out of, I'm a Chicagoan at heart, but ended up in Portland, Oregon for a couple of years. And just through sort of accident, managed to get connected with a quilting project at the Coffee Creek Correctional Facility outside of Portland. And this is a project that's been going on for 10 years, teaching quilting inside with the women's prison there. In a lot of ways, it's really groundbreaking. And I'm really grateful for being able to do that. I spent a year teaching quilting there and making friends at a time when I was feeling really isolated. But even though it was this deeply fulfilling experience, it was really clear to me that this was not an abolitionist project. It really came from a charity rather than a solidarity or a liberation model. There was, sort of a sense of these volunteers who were here to help wayward women correct themselves through the healing power of quilts. And so I knew sort of at the end of my time there that I wanted to take some of the things that were so powerful about this, giving people who are incarcerated a chance to be surrounded by color and beauty and make things. The power of quilts to connect people with their families, their family memories, but also physically. Many of my students were making quilts to mail to their loved ones outside of the prison, where they were really desperately trying to, maintain these relationships across incarceration. So when I had the opportunity to come back to Chicago, I ended up proposing a project in Cook County Jail. I know a lot of you guys do work in prisons, so it's really difficult to get materials and tools in, especially for a new program. So we ended up working with students at the jail to design quilts. So we were doing storytelling about families, about this idea of inheritance, about what they wanted to pass on to their loved ones. And then they were designing quilts for their loved ones. So you can see some of the designs there. we had volunteer quilters outside of the prison make those quilts and mail them to their loved ones. So you can see some of the beautiful interpretations of the students' designs that were made. But with all of my work, I always really want to link it back into movements, link it back into systems change. I don't just want to make an intolerable situation like prison more tolerable, although I do want to do that. So I also organized community quilting circles in partnership with the Chicago Community Bond Fund and in partnership with Love and Protect, who works to support women, non-binary, and trans folks who have been criminalized for their survival. And we worked to embroider some of the writings of the students and make this community quilt panel, which featured both blocks from their quilt and embroideries of their writings about inheritance. And this, for a lot of reasons, this isn't my favorite project. It felt really short. We had 6 weeks with the students. It wasn't enough time to develop trust. I never felt like the quilting circles were really creating a real sense of connection or empathy for between the people who are embroidering and the experiences of folks on the inside. But I also feel like I learned a lot as an abolitionist artist and as an artist who wants to center abolition in my work moving forward. And I'm really looking forward post-pandemic to doing this work here in Ohio on a much slower, longer term basis. Quilting is slow, storytelling is slow, organizing is slow. So really be able to develop a project in collaboration with incarcerated women from beginning to end. And I also just have my info up here. I'm organizing an abolitionist quilters conference in Chicago next summer. So if you or someone you love is an abolitionist and a quilter and wants to come to Chicago, get in touch with me. I think it's going to be a really incredible experience. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much to each of these people. You can see why I wanted them to be in conversation with each other and with me this afternoon and with you. So much just impactful, important work, and done really conscientiously, with always centering the needs of the folks who are criminalized and incarcerated, always making it participatory, or at least trying to, even against the systems that make it so hard for us to maintain relationships with each other. And so we're going to have a few minutes amongst ourselves right now to just either pick up on something you heard from someone else that you want to engage, or add to something that you didn't get a chance to really speak about when you had your 5 minutes, something that you want to kind of add and expand upon further. I'm opening it up to everybody who wants to do that. And if you just want to, start, you can start, unmute yourself and start talking. And you can ask questions of each other too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a question, more so just like really loving what Monica had to say about process and just like experimentation and this sort of, this iterative or feedback loop of just like failing, trying again, experimenting again, failing and experimenting over and over again, and really just like emphasizing the point that like process is just as important as the end results, and if not more important than the end result. Like I think that that's something that I think about a lot, is just like I'm not really concerned with what the final thing is. I just want to go through it, and I want to go through it with other people. And I think that process, or that action of being in struggle and like trying things and failing and trying again, is a really important point, just to talk about amongst ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was just going to quickly shout out there's this toolkit, or not even a toolkit, but there's this resource that I was inspired by, that was created actually by Micah Bazant and Forward Together and I believe Fabiana Rodriguez had a part in it as well. And it's how to reimagine the world. It's a collaborative principles for artists and organizers. And I can link it after I'm done talking, but I think it's been really beneficial, not only for artists to understand how to work with organizations, but then also how organizations should see how it is to work with artists and how to value their work, but also how to understand that it's really an experiment. It's really, and it's going to be different every single time with every single different person you work with. And so I've found a lot of the process thought through this document, and I'll link to it in the chat.
Bianca, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, that is something that I personally have struggled with, is like being in community, but also doing art. I feel like find that this kind of work makes me be really insular, and I kind of like that. Like, I like being in my studio and like making, and it takes so long to make these intricate like paintings, and so I'm learning a lot and just like really admiring how you guys like bring your work and even just your like physical person to like community and working with other people. I mean, I find that I am able to do that, like collaborating, but mostly it's through email, and so it's like not face to face really. And I just feel like the studio is really isolating, so I'm excited to just keep finding ways to kind of connect more physically and like be more intentional about community.
I think that's a really important point. Oh, sorry, did I cut you off, Rachel?
No, go.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point to bring up the isolation that involves artistry and crafting and making in general, because, you know, I'm somebody who I could say that I make things that can be interpreted as art objects, but I don't take on the title of artist myself, because I think I have a lot of conflict surrounding what you're describing, this idea that the artist is somebody who's individuated, has a studio, is very exceptional and has like all these creative ideas and is just like this brilliant person, or should aspire to be this brilliant, you know, creator. And I think that the title artist, the way that we understand artists in our society, is very much so in conflict and at odds with my own politics in abolition, as being somebody who's rooted in community, very much so, you know, collectively situated and has, just like affinity, and is a constellation, is not like what we're like a star, like this individuated artist, you know, capital A artist who has like this career and this body of work and so on and so forth. So I think that I feel you. I'm just like affirming everything that you say. And I think it's really hard to work collaboratively in general and to work on projects, whether it's art making projects or it's like organizing projects. So to even like go towards the other end of the spectrum to say that you are somebody who's community focused or is collectively situated is difficult, as well as almost more difficult, I think, than being able to just say like I'm an artist. Like, what does it mean to be able to say like I'm a part of this community, I belong here, you know, when so many of us like spend our whole entire lives like striving for that.
Yeah, I similarly am really feeling that sort of tension between community and isolation, especially over the past year, right, with the pandemic. And I really I don't know how to like not sit in a room with someone when I'm collaborating too, like just not being able to like share food or coffee. One of the things I really love about my work is there's something magical with sewing, with working with your hands, that when your hands are occupied, your like brain slows down and your heart opens up and you're able to listen a little bit better and connect with people. And I've really missed those moments in my work over the last year. But I'm also just really grateful that the work I do has to be really slow. Like, I think if left to my own devices, I would like rush through things, and quilts just don't work like that. So it forces me to take time and get feedback and like digest shit before it gets finished.
I was just gonna say, I always feel like I'm in that in between, because as a therapist, I feel like there's lots of things I want to say in my art, and I feel like I only probably dive into about 10% of it because of that, like that constant conflict of like, do I say exactly what I want to say and convey it in this way, knowing that I have this other identity, and like, how do I separate the two? And so I find myself like wanting to make art about Palestine and wanting to make just showing more of myself and my own internal struggles, but having to dial it back. And yeah, so just like being an artist, I feel like sometimes I can't bring my full self because of that therapist identity, but I wouldn't be here if I didn't have the therapist identity. So yeah, I'm always feeling as if like I'm wrestling with like how much of my full self to bring into the artwork.
Well, Naima, I think that you like, I mean, I'm lucky to work with you in For the People Artist Collective. And I think that it's been so wonderful to see the ways that you've brought in your art therapy into a lot of our very much rapid response art making. Like, I feel like I've been in rapid response mode for the last 5 years, you know, and you really helped to sort of share this politic of slowing down and channeling and deepening the work between our like relationship building, and emphasizing that, I think, has been so beneficial. And, you know, I think everyone here can identify with this, the importance of doing this. Neta had mentioned this work is so slow. It's so slow. And that's how it should be, right? We shouldn't be rushing through a lot of this, art making, right? Because it's about, we don't want a future of rush and of productivity and of you know, yeah. And so we really, what we do want is this future of everybody, nobody being left behind, and everybody having a place in this work. And so I think your therapist identity, I think, brings so much to this work in movement and abolition art.
I want to just jump in for a second and really highlight this issue of the difference between capitalist time and actual organizing time, and art making time and world building time. These are not the same things. And in fact, capitalist time impinges on the possibility of world building and world making. And I think, you know, art is a great place to practice the prefiguration that is needed for being outside of capitalist time, while at the same time artists have to make a living and have to operate under the capitalist constraints. So I get it, and that makes sense, but I think the points that you're making speak to the issue of lack of urgency and non-capitalist time being a part of prefigurative activity that puts one foot into the world we want while we keep one foot here, because right, abolition is not linear. So so yeah, I just want to put that out there. So we really have 10 more minutes before we are wrapping up, and I want to give an opportunity for the people who are here who may have a question or a comment that you want to share publicly. Please put it in the chat, and I'll try to manage sharing that with everybody. If you have something that you want to ask. Somebody, Mariana, has a raised hand. Feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for everyone, your art, your stories. I have a general question that really came up for me when Rachel was speaking about the in-prison arts program, but this question can be for anybody. What are some ideas that you all have in terms of transforming an in-prison arts curriculum to shift away from that corrective perspective? Because I'm the arts manager, or I'm the program manager for arts and corrections in California. And what I see in the curriculum happening is, of course, it's very prescriptive or very centered about just teaching the art form. And so I would like to hear different ways of incorporating some of these liberatory practices and abolitionist practices to enter the institutions sort of under the radar, but also be effective at also organizing within the institution. Thank you.
I think it'd be good for Rachel to pick this up, and then for everybody else who wants to comment to add that in too.
I mean, that's a really key question, and I don't know that I have the answer to it. I want to point to the Prison and Neighborhood Arts Project in Chicago and Illinois, which I think does an incredible job of both providing liberatory programming within prisons, but also like linking that to strong abolitionist principles and organizing outside. And for me, it really just comes out to this belief that making is liberatory. The process of making with our hands and believing in our vision and taking risks and feeling supported and learning and making mistakes, I think is fundamentally healing and fundamentally liberating. And I hope that comes through sort of regardless. But yeah, it's a really hard question. I don't know how much we can be liberatory inside prisons. I know I want to try, but it might not be possible.
I mean, I think it goes back to the quote that I made with what Erica talked about, which is liberation under oppression. It's unthinkable by design. These institutions don't want you to be in there liberating anybody. They're prisons. The job is enclosure and torture. And I think, you know, we for many years, we ran a program at one of the juvenile justice, quote unquote, one of the juvenile jails in Chicago in Cook County. And we ran a program called Girl Talk, where we would go in every single couple of weeks. We'd bring in volunteers and we would do these projects where we would show movies to young people. We would then have a discussion and then we'd do art with them on the inside. And, you know, these jails used as a way, it's like kind of a weaponized way of controlling young people by saying, you can't come to this project or this program anymore if you don't do these 4 things. This is a punishment for you, so you can come if you are good. We worked so hard to break that and threatened to leave the jail if they continued to do that with the young people, because we would hear from them. We'd say, well, you weren't here a couple weeks ago, and they would be like, we were on punishment, they didn't let us come. And I'm like, this is completely counter to what we were talking about this whole thing being. We fought and fought and fought, lasted in there for 3 years, but finally we decided to make a hard decision, which was to leave. We had to, because they continued to do some things that were completely contrary to what we were trying to do through the curriculum. And it was heartbreaking because those young people did not have programs and they needed those spaces and they wanted them, right? So it's always this kind of balance of like, what do you do when folks are in need and want of the thing you're offering, but at the same time, the institution is making it almost impossible for you to do the thing that you're hoping to actually do. These are hard things, they're hard calls. It took us much longer to leave than we should have, I think. But I think our leaving made it possible for other groups to have an easier time, because they were afraid for other groups to be leaving. That we heard from our peers, like they are so much more open now. I'm like, yeah, because people actually said, we're taking our toys and getting out of here because you all are oppressive bastards. We're not doing this anymore. You know, there are times when you have to fight and push back and leave. There are times when that's actually the best possibility for the future. And I know that's hard, but we're always making those choices, always doing that. So, okay. Here's a question in here. What is the relationship between art and moving through feelings of burnout and exhaustion? Does anybody want to take that? And then I'll ask Aiden's question next. How are you dealing with that? Some of you are terrible at taking care of yourselves. I'm not going to put your business out here, but you are. So maybe you should not be commenting. I'm not going to say who, but I'm not saying a few of you should not be commenting. Maybe we'll have Naima comment.
I would say so I'm probably horrible about practicing it myself. I'm usually up till 3 a.m. doing art, and then I wake up to do it all over again. So, but I will say one thing that I convey to people is practicing self-compassion, and really saying no to like other people means that you're saying yes to yourself. And it does feel self-indulgent. It does feel like, oh, I can't set this boundary with family, or I can't set this boundary with someone else. And it's like, you have to, especially during the pandemic, because if you don't, people will keep asking and wanting more and more of your time and energy, and just having that piece of self-compassion, because we're so compassionate with, well, not all of us, but we're like, compassion is given to others more easily. Whereas when it comes to self-compassion, it's like, well, how am I feeling? What am I doing? Am I really like burnt out? And so that's been helpful for some people, just to take it like 1 through 4 steps of like, what am I feeling? Am I tired? Do I need something? Do I need to rest? And if I need to do these things, it's okay to say no. And it doesn't mean I'm flaky. I think that's like the biggest thing, is people don't want to seem like they are flaky or don't know what they want. It's like, no, you want time to rest. And so that's some ways that I've kind of helped some clients kind of just like work through that burnout.
I also think it's really important to like not, and this is something that I'm going to keep working through for the rest of my life, is not using art making or crafting as an escape from other traumas and other difficult things that I'm dealing with in my life, and understanding when to take a break from my art projects and my hobbies. Because while it can be really soothing and like meditating to work through projects, and whether it's I'm sewing something, or maybe I'm binding a zine, or maybe I'm just like really immersed in whatever action craft I'm in, like sometimes it's like, okay, you're ODing, like you're doing too much on this one project, and you just need to like take a step back, and like maybe there are other ways for you to rest and like heal that will in turn like eventually like help the project be better. Or maybe not, like it's not even about like taking a break from the project to make the project better. It's just like the art in and of itself cannot be the solve that's like healing everything. Like there needs to be like a multitude of ways to like find healing from burnout and other exhaustion from day-to-day life.
All right, I'm going to ask this question asked by Aiden. How do you keep this work accessible in the many layers of access we need? Community space, creative space, organizing space, time space, virtual space, transportation space, to be inclusive, especially for disabled folks who are incarcerated or trapped in homes. Anybody have a feedback or information on that?
I mean, I can say my practice really came out of my own experience of disability and not being able to, I had a terrible bike crash and I wasn't able to be an activist in the ways I had been before. I just couldn't physically do it. So making art allowed me to feel like I was a part of a movement sitting down and during daytime hours. And it's also allowed me to be in collaboration intergenerationally with a lot of older folks I might not have been able to work with in movements. But I think that's a really good question.
Well, I mean, I think part of this is also like access is money. It takes money. I mean, I just think a lot of the conversations we have in some of these spaces make no sense to me, because it's, we want to pay interpreters. We want to pay, we want to offer transportation CTA passes to people. We want to do all this stuff, and it takes money, and no one wants to fund any of the things that most of us are doing. And so like, if we don't talk about things in a real sense, and we just make a way by no way, like this is part of the burnout and the people deciding they're just not going to do it. It's often not a situation where people don't want to, but then we're caught in a situation where it's like we're asking people to pay to come to things, and people don't want to pay to come to things. And then it's like, well, and then you have to have the suite of every possible accessibility feature. How is that going to happen? There's a gap between what we're willing to pay for and what we're actually wanting from these spaces. And we do live under capitalism. And if we didn't live under capitalism, we'd still be living under a situation where we'd be laboring. And we'd have to figure out a way to remunerate that labor, if not by money, but by other kinds of things. And so I don't know. I get really frustrated because I hate talking in abstractions, as though then the weight is put on just a few organizers to constantly come up with the answers to everything. And then if not, to be dragged for not doing XYZ without any conversation about political economies, which make it hard for people to do the things that we want to have happen, or to bring the visions of the world we want to actually happen to reality. Someone has to pay for shit. who is that going to be? Like, who is going to do that? And I constantly ask that of people on a regular basis. I'm like, who's going to pay for that thing? Because I don't want to exploit people. But if we don't have it, then we're exploiting people. Because we really want to bring in more people. The inclusivity costs because it's a labor intensive thing. So yeah, I just think it's not only that, but it's a big part of that. That really never gets addressed in these kinds of spaces, in our spaces. Like, it's like, most leftists don't like to talk about money. And this is a major problem for us. For lots of good reasons. But that's a problem. The right talks about money and they have it. And they can do shit with it. And we are always patching things up with Band-Aids and wire. And I just think if we don't have this conversation and be real about this, we're not going to move forward. And so I appreciate the question a great deal. But I do think, like, somebody's going to have to tell me how we're going to pay for shit. Somebody's going to have to do it. And somebody has to do the fundraising. And almost no one in any group wants to be the person doing that. Everybody just wants to either do the sexy thing or show up or do the thing that doesn't involve having to do the labor that is, again, totally seen as like almost magic. And then everybody's mad who people take money from. Yeah, I had to go off on that because it's one of my biggest pet peeves, and I don't think we can't talk about it enough. So we need to, yes, heard, thank you. The revolution must be accessible. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we have 5 minutes. So I just want to end with giving each person 1 minute to end with whatever thought you want to end with, what's going on in your head. Don't respond to my money rant, but you know I'm right. So I don't need to have any affirmations. Just kidding. All right. So I'm going to kick off with Neta, who's going to close us out with your 1 minute thought.
It's hard not to respond to what you just said. I feel like, yeah, for me, all the work that I do is about figuring out what I'm uncomfortable with and inconveniencing myself and trying to figure out what that negotiation is with other people who I'm in community with. And that's what the process is for me, is like, yeah, I have ideas and I have, sort of creative visions and imaginations, but how do I reconcile my imagination with other people's imaginations and try to create something that not only I feel good about, but also the other person feels good about. And so, yeah, that choreography, that dance is like something that I feel really committed to. And it makes me feel uncomfortable at times, but ultimately I think that's what it's about, is like asking the difficult questions and getting to questions that lead us to better questions that then lead us to the better world. And this once we get to that better world, it's not like, as Mariame was suggesting, that everything's just going to dissolve and be good and everyone's not, suffering and there aren't, people are all living dignified lives. We're always going to be in conflict and like in struggle with each other. And so the ways and the tools that we have to navigate those, that process of creating those tools, those instruments, is what I'm interested in. So yeah, I'll end there and pass it on to the next person.
Thank you. Bianca, you're next.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm very grateful to be here with you guys and learn from all of you. This was awesome for me. And yeah, that's, I think, the thing that I've, like, when Mariame asked us to talk, she was like, talk about how your work does or does not intersect with an abolitionist politic. And I thought that was interesting, like the thought of coming here and talking about how it does not. And I think that, yeah, like what we touched on earlier was just like the isolation thing. That's kind of a big takeaway for me right now. It's just like, I'm, I guess, a bit shy, so I like being alone, but I also deeply want to like make my community stronger and be in community with other people. And just, so that's something, yeah, like, I don't know, like they say, like the, I don't know, struggle of an artist is like wanting to hide and also wanting to be seen, that constant, like, whatever, dilemma. So that's something I'm thinking about. And I don't know what else to say about that, but I just appreciate hearing everyone's thoughts and being in conversation today. Thank you.
Thanks, Bianca. Naima?
Yeah, super thankful to be in this space. And yeah, I can't help but think about the money because I feel like all the things I want to do, but as a Black woman with lots of student debt, I came to this work not to make a lot of money, and just thinking like, how do I create something where I can be creative and an artist and a therapist at the same time? I've been looking, trying to find that balance. And I think that that is a struggle, like time and access and funds is just like always forcing you to do that dance. And so I think it just takes away so much time from learning and growing. And so I want to make more of an effort to start incorporating more of that in my art practice, and just super thankful to be in space with everybody. I think I want to make some art, but I'm also a little tired, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, just thankful to be in this space and just continuously thinking about how I can use my art as a way to bridge more like community and connection with people and myself too, because I'm learning and growing. So.
Thanks, Naima. Monica?
Yeah, oh my gosh, I have so many things that am circulating in my head right now that I am just really grateful for all of this. I am leaving thinking of two things. One is what Neta said about how craft and struggle are intertwined. And I really love that because I think they're intertwined, they mesh well together. Organizing is in itself an art, and making art in service to movement is an art. It's all about making things, right? And I think that we can keep creating at the pace that feels good for us. And I think that when we feel this pressure to create, I think that we can stop and ask ourselves, do I need to speak on this? Do I need to make art on this specific thing? Or is there someone else that's going to do it that I can uplift in this moment? So those are sort of two things that I'm leaving thinking about, and really appreciating what everybody has shared today. So thank you.
Thank you. Rachel, you're closing us out.
Thank you, guys. I'm so lucky to be sitting here with you today. I really appreciate it. I feel like the greatest gift Abolition has given me as an artist is this space to fail, this knowledge that we can all make mistakes and learn and grow, and to trust the people around me. I think trying to make my art practice abolitionist, not just that it's working towards abolition, but also that it is a space where nothing is discarded, that nothing was a waste, has been really magical to me as an artist and really helpful. Thank you, Mariame, for everything you do.
Thank you all. I'm so grateful for you. Thank you for being part of this conversation. It was so generative. You're all so brilliant, and also happen to be lovely people, which is not always the case. There are lots of brilliant, awful people. Anyway, I won't go into that. I'll just leave it alone. I do have thoughts, but I'm just going to keep them to myself for this period, so I don't ruin their event and conference. But anyway, so thank you all for joining us, and I hope that the things that are in the chat in terms of resources are useful. I hope you connect with some of the other folks. Be on the lookout for Bianca and my book this fall. It's called See You Soon, and it's going to be beautiful and awesome. Looking forward to it, and looking forward to the ongoing and continued collaborations. Rachel and my collaboration coming up to be shared with everybody, and then continued work with Neta and Monica and Naima into the future. So thank you all. Bye.
Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Mariame, for this wonderful panel. I enjoyed this so much. I hope you all did too. And I hope that everyone found something to enjoy, something new to learn. In the chat, I'm going to put a link if you would like to donate to Jack. The funds received during the convening will be put towards payment towards these wonderful panelists and presenters, and prioritizing increased honorariums for carceral system impacted presenters. I'm also going to be putting in the way to stay connected with Jack right here. You can use those links to stay updated through email, volunteering, and or our social media. I'm also going to put in the link for our open space schedule. We have some spaces open tonight that might be interesting for you, as well as finally a survey. If this is your last event or session with us, please feel free to take this survey. That way we know how to improve for next year and we can keep doing better, keep serving you. All right, thank you all so much for coming and have a great night.
Bye, everybody. Thank you to the interpreters for making it possible for all the folks to participate in multiple ways. We appreciate you. Bye.
Hey, folks.
So much, everyone. Oh, go ahead, Kenny and Sola, go ahead.
If you are interested in hanging out a little bit longer and just connecting more with people that you have interacted with during today's convening, or have like thoughts that are still on your mind or on your heart from this last session, or something you just like are really, really excited about or want to dig deeper into, feel free to hang out in this room. We have just like this open hangout space. Oh yeah, it's going to be here for a while. Maybe we'll give people a second to adjust, move around if they need to, but then we'll go in and introduce ourselves and just share what's on our minds and anything we want to like just discuss further with other members of the convening community.
Haley or Maya or anyone, do you know?
I was gonna switch it over to Maya.
Jesse put the link in Slack, but I'm not, it's on my phone and what room is it? You could message it to just me, maybe. It's not my fault. Work blocked every website.
Thanks for hanging out, everyone. Take a breather or a stretch. Some of us are going to have to bounce off for a planning team check-in, but this room will stay open, and yeah, we'll check in with everyone. Maybe everyone can introduce themselves and hang out for a few.
Hi, Wendy.
Hey, Mark.
I'm dying.
Don't die, please. We need you around.
This cold's kick. I'm getting it's getting better, but ugh, I hate it. My eyes are all puffy and you know, it's a cold.
Yeah, I know, but they suck, especially in the summer.
Been drinking a lot of Alka-Seltzer. It's had me groggy.
Tasty.
Well,
okay, I'm gonna see when you guys in the debrief room. Thank you so much, Lex. I think we're finished with the part that requires interpretation. You are of course welcome to stay, but
thank you, Lex.
take a break.
Thank you. Y'all have a good day.
You're amazing. Thank
So
you.
much.
Thank you so much.
I think people are wrapping up their day. Hi, George. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I am really grateful for just being part of that conversation.
Amazing.
Just sitting with a lot of, yeah, just trying to get my thoughts around and just, but yeah, I'm George. I'm in Troy, New York, and happy to be here.
Troy.
Mhm.